What is cracking, everybody? Hello and welcome back to Gaming 101 with Mr. Berger. Tonight we're going to take a look at the recently released balance changes. I'm going to talk about the decisions that they made and my opinions on them, and I'm going to talk about some cards that I think that they missed and they could have definitely made some tweaks to. And we're going to back these opinions up with some stats from Stats Royale. We'll start by watching this video here and seeing what they did. So we got the Dark Prince first of all. Shield hit points minus 25%. Well, let's take a look. I got all three of these different categories set up here. I got Arena 12 on ladder on Stats Royale stats. And I've got the Grand Challenge stats. And I've also got the Classic Challenge stats. So if we take a look here at the Arena 12 usage and win rates, we see that the Dark Prince has 13.7% usage rate and almost 60% win rate. So he's used in a ton of decks. He's been super prevalent in the meta, and this is no surprise. So they gave him that 25% shield nerf, and we'll see how it goes. Here in the Grand Challenge win and usage rates, he's got almost a 15% usage rate, and again above 60% win rate. And lastly, in the Classic Challenges, he's got an almost 75% win rate with a 30% usage rate. He's the fourth used card in the past few days in Classic Challenges. So I think that this nerf to him, this 25% HP nerf to the shield, is an interesting way for them to tweak it. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that they could have done a bigger nerf, but hey, that's what they chose to do. Let's see how it goes before we speak too soon. The next thing that they did is they gave the Knight a 3% HP buff. I'm pretty happy about this because the Knight is my favorite card. You can see him over to your, right, my left, whatever you want to call it, over there on the other side of the screen. I really like the Knight, but they nerfed him really hard. We can see his usage rates and win rates are actually pretty decent. This is in Arena 12. This is right here is in Grand Challenges, 62% and 15% usage rate. And this here is in Classic Challenges. You can see that he's still used, and he has about a 60% win rate with a 7.2% usage rate, which is pretty solid. But regardless, I'm glad that they buffed him because he's one of my favorite cards, and I feel like they nerfed him too hard because he was very prevalent, very used, and really strong. So I'm glad that they're returning him to some of his former glory because he definitely got a really hard nerf. The next card is the Dark Goblin. I'm super happy about this. The Dark Goblin is one of my favorite cards, and I've been requesting him a lot in my alt account. We can see he's got a pretty good win rate here, but a very low usage rate in Arena 12. Same thing for for the Grand Challenges, and same thing for the Classic Challenges. We see a decent win rate, but a very low usage rate. I think that the reason for this is because he just kind of runs in and dies, and he just doesn't have the damage to make him viable compared to alternatives that cost 3 elixirs such as the Princess or even the Archers. But I'm glad that they're going to go ahead and buff him again. I think that that 3% damage will be really solid for him. It's not going to make a huge difference, but it'll be pretty cool. Now, next thing we have here is the Spear Goblins. The Spear Goblins are going to get a 0.1% reduction in their hit speed. Now, although the Spear Goblins themselves may not be the major problem, we see that the Goblin Hut and here the Goblin Gang are used very high. They have very high usage rates in all three of these categories, and very high win rates as well. In Classic Challenges, it's the second most used card behind Zap right now, and in Arena 12, it's the third most used card behind Zap and Log. And of course, if you know the current meta, you'll know that the Spear Goblin Hut is very prevalent, and you've been seeing a lot of resurgence of Spear Goblins in the place of the Ice Spirit in a lot of bait decks. So I think that that nerf is going to be solid. They gave it a very similar nerf not too long ago, and it just wasn't enough, so we'll see how it goes this time. Next card that we have here is the Ice Spirit nerf. This is an interesting nerf. I don't know how I feel about this. We can see that the Ice Spirit has very high usage and win rates in the Arena 12 category, as well as in Grand Challenges, and also in Classic Challenges. The Ice Spirit is definitely a very cycle-like card. It's the ultimate cycle card. It only costs 1 elixir. It gives you huge potential for positive elixir trades, and I absolutely love it. So they're giving an area damage nerf of 4%, as well as a freeze duration nerf of 0.5 seconds, and that's the major nerf to it. The area damage isn't that big of a deal. I don't think that changes too many major interactions, but the freeze duration, that will be a pretty big nerf to it. The next thing that they're doing here is the skeleton barrel. This is awesome because the skeleton barrel, it got a nerf and it just kind of fell off the map. The skeleton barrel is one of the least used cards in all three of these categories. Now the win rates are above 50%, but that's probably just because the few people that decide to use it. I think that this will be a solid buff to it. It's not going to make it super OP like it used to be, but it'll bring it back to some of its former glory. I'm excited to use the skeleton barrel again. Next thing that they did is they buffed the barbarian barrel. They gave it a 0.5 increase in its range. The barbarian barrel landed very softly, and I think that this is a much needed buff. If we take a look at all three categories, we can see that it's very low in its usage rates. It's one of the bottom cards in all three of these categories. The major interaction change that this brings is that it will allow the barbarian barrel to connect to the king tower when it's placed in the pocket. Next we have the lightning. I'm super psyched for the lightning. I love lightning. They nerfed its range before, or its radius rather, so that it was minus 0.5, and they now increased it back so that it's plus 0.5, and now has a 3.5 radius, allowing it to connect to an inferno tower and a princess tower with the same lightning, no matter where they place their inferno tower to defend. Unless of course it's placed somewhere unconventionally, like at the bridge, but if they place it in any of the usual spots in the center of their side of the arena, then the lightning will be able to hit that and the princess tower. We can see that lightning has very low usage rates in all three of these categories. The win rates aren't too bad actually, so it's still a pretty decent card, but I think that this buff will bring it back to some of its former glory, and I'm really excited to use it again. The next thing that we have is the tornado. Now this is an interesting tweak, because what they did is they reduced the duration by 0.5 seconds, but they increased its DPS. What that means is that it actually does less damage overall, but it does it in a shorter time. The tornado was released and it quickly won over the hearts of many. It has very high usage rates and win rates in all three of these categories here. I really like the tornado. It's a super strong card. It has the potential to play multiple roles. It has a huge utility. When it was released, I saw it and I was like, man, this card is really strong. You can pull stuff into your king tower. That's huge. And it quickly became one of the most used cards and won out the spot over the cannon and the inferno tower and many other cards in bait decks and in control decks and even beatdown decks. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the cards that they missed and some of the interactions that I didn't mention earlier. The Dart Goblin first of all. The Dart Goblin is now going to be able to two-shot minions, so that's going to be one of the major interaction chain. Now I had a whole set of predictions of cards that I thought that they were going to, release, or excuse me, that they were going to tweak and they were going to buff or nerf, and a lot of them actually came true. And when they released these, I was like, dang it, I can't do my prediction video. So instead, I'm going to do kind of a review video and talk about the ones that I think that they missed. I think that they should have tweaked the Bomber. Now, the Bomber has atrocious usage rates in Arena 12. Actually, not too bad. In Grand Challenges, we can see it has decent usage and win rates. And in Classic Challenges, it's very low. Now, I feel like what they could have done to the Bomber, as well as the Bomb Tower, the Bomb Tower scoring is one of the lowest used cards in Arena 12, the lowest in Grand Challenges, and the lowest in Classic Challenges. That being said, the Bomber here has decent usage rates in all arenas, and the Bomb Tower is super low in all arenas. I think that what they could have done to buff the Bomber and the Bomb Tower is they could have basically made it so that they scale more with each level. So I think that what they should do basically is, because the usage rates of these cards are definitely higher in lower arenas, you don't want to buff them in those lower arenas at lower levels because they're already decent there and they play their role. But I think that they could make them so that they scale higher, or they scale more with each level, get like a 0.1% increase in damage more with each level, or a 1% increase in damage more with each level, so on and so forth, so that they're actually viable at the higher arenas and the higher trophy count. Now, a few more cards that I think that they missed. I think that they probably could have buffed the Mega Knight. If we look here in Classic Challenges, he's got a decent win rate and usage rate. In Arena 12, he's also got a decent win and usage rate. And in Grand Challenges, he's also got a decent win and usage rate. But I feel like the last nerf that they gave him was just really too hard. I just feel personally like I haven't seen him a lot lately, and I think that they would return him to some of his former glory, just like those other cards like the next card that I want to talk about is the Bowler. If we take a look here, we can see that the Bowler has very low usage rates in all three of these categories. 1.7% there, 3 point something in the last, and only 0.7% here in Classic Challenges. I think that a cool and interesting concept that they could do is they could allow him to push back the Prince and the Dark Prince and more heavy minions, basically. And this is not by any means an original concept by me. It was discussed by various other YouTubers and on Reddit, so I'm sure that you can go check out some other people's opinions on that, but I think that that's a pretty good way of fixing it. Otherwise, maybe they could just make him a little bit stronger, give him a little bit more DPS or something like that. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the 3 utility spells, or is it 4, actually? We got the Heal, we got the Freeze, we got the Clone, and I guess you could even include the Mirror. Now, I don't want to spend too much time looking at the usage and win rates of these, but you can see here that the Heal in Classic Challenges is super low. In Arena 12, it is also super low. And in Grand Challenges, it is the lowest used card right now, after a refreshed Stats Royale here. Now, I'm not quite sure how they could do this. There's some interesting opinions out there about how, maybe there isn't anything that they should do to fix these spells, because some people think okay, not every single card has to be super viable in all arenas. They can be kind of these fun niche spells. Like Clone is really awesome in 2v2, for example. If you haven't run 2v2 Golem Clone with a Lumberjack and a bunch of Swarm cards, it's amazing. It's great. Put a balloon or something in there. It's awesome. But it's not necessarily super viable. It's very high risk, high reward, and I think that there's a few tweaks that they can make to these spells to make them a little bit better. I'm not too sure exactly what they could do, but the Mirror, the Heal, the Clone, the Freeze, they've all got very low usage rates. I think that maybe for Freeze they could reduce the cost a little bit so that it's not as high of a risk. For Heal, I think that they could just basically give it an increase in the heal and maybe an increase back in the duration that it lasts, because they did buff that, they did nerf that at one point, and I think that it's only viable in one deck, which is the 3 Musketeers Pump Minion Horde deck, basically, and you almost never see it used anymore, so I think they need to buff that heal. For Mirror, I think that it needs a rework. Honestly, I think it could be as simple as just reducing the cost so that it only costs the same amount as the previous card that you played rather than an increase by 1. Some people think that maybe you need a way to lock in a certain card so you can play a Knight, and then you can play an Ice Spirit, and then you can play a Mirrored Knight after that. I think that that would be a very interesting concept too, but it might get out of hand. We'll see how it goes, but I think that they need to tweak it. For Clone, I think that it's actually pretty solid. Maybe just a reduction in the cost as well, again, so it's not as high risk, and it's a little bit more viable. Now, I would like to talk briefly about Barbarians. We can see the Barbarians have very low usage rates in Arena 12, in Grand Challenges, and in Classic Challenges. They are above a 50% win rate, but at that low usage rate, that's not necessarily super reflective of them being a good card. Overall, they only have a 2.4% usage rate in all arenas and ladder, so that's not so great. I think that they could tweak Barbarians. I feel like they should just give them an increase in something, just a minor stat increase overall maybe, kind of similar to what they've done to some other cards, and bring them back up to some of their former glory with those other cards, because they were viable earlier in the game when there wasn't so many other alternatives that were better, that could play a similar role for the same cost, if not cheaper. Now, another card that I think that they should have actually nerfed, let's talk about nerfs now, is the regular Prince. I feel like they should have nerfed the regular Prince on top of the Dark Prince. If we look at the regular Prince's usage and win rates, it's very high usage rate, or rather a very high win rate in Arena 12, and a decent usage rate. But look at the challenges. In Grand Challenges and in Classic Challenges, 24% usage rate, 19.2% usage rate. I mean, he's really popular. He's really strong. He's kind of out of control. The double Prince meta is out of control. And I feel like they should have nerfed the other Prince too. Now I want to talk briefly about the X-Bow. We can see that the X-Bow has very low usage rates but above 50% win rate in Arena 12. Very low usage rates but above 50% win rate in Grand Challenges. And same thing goes for Classic Challenges. So I feel like the X-Bow is one of those cards that is kind of a very high skill cap card, or it's not very popular, but the people that use it and then know how to use it, it works out really well for them. It's got very big potential to be very deadly. Now, do I even need to say it? Zap. Zap has crazy high usage rates in all three categories. It's got the highest usage rates in Arena 12, in Classic Challenges, and in Grand Challenges. Even in the category of ladder of all arenas, it is the highest used card. In all of these categories, it is the highest used card. I honestly feel like the Zap doesn't really need that big of a nerf. I don't feel like it's too bad, but the usage rates and the win rates are so insanely high, so to me that kind of reflects like, okay, maybe it does need a nerf. Maybe there's something that they could do to tweak it a little bit, make it a little bit better, or a little bit weaker rather. And so then the usage rates won't be insanely high. But you can see that the log is also very high in usage rates, and that's just kind of the nature of the game. You generally have like one medium spell and one light spell, and if you don't, you usually have one light spell at least in most decks, so one log or one zap. So I think that it's actually pretty solid where it's at, but I don't know, maybe they could tweak it. It's not like log has really low usage rates, which is the major alternative to zap. The log is still used a lot, so maybe some minor tweaks. Now let's talk briefly about E-Barbs and about the Royal Giant. We can see here at Arena 12 the E-Barbs actually have a pretty high usage rate and a pretty high win rate, but in the challenges, in Grand Challenges, very low usage rate, very low win rate. Classic Challenge, decent win rate, very low usage rate. Same thing goes for the Royal Giant. I don't want to waste time showing stats for the Royal Giant because it's basically pretty similar to the E-Barbs. But if you play on ladder, you know the scenario for E-Barbs and Royal Giant. They're over leveled and they're super annoying. People only play them if they're like maxed out or like level 12 or at least like level 11 depending on what arena you're in. And they're really annoying to deal with and they're really strong. And the reason for that is because they're super easy to request and level up because they're common and they can be considered a common win condition. And that allows them to be over leveled depending on what your arena you are in, and they just absolutely dominate all the other cards because they don't have the opportunity to catch up. Most of the other win conditions and really deadly cards are going to be at least rares, if not epics, and those are going to be harder to level up. So the fact that you can level up the Royal Giant and the E-Barbs like crazy, and they just absolutely tear through stuff at higher level, is what makes them so annoying and so powerful. So my proposition to this is similar to what I proposed for the Bomb Tower and the Bomber. I think that they should basically reduce the way that these cards scale out. They should give them a buff to all of their stats, a minor buff to all of their stats at lower levels, and they should give them definitely a pretty large nerf to their stats at higher levels. Now there's a lot of interesting concepts out there as to how you could balance out these E-Barbs. Some people think, especially in one of the Clash with Ash videos, he commented about how one of his guests said that they should make it so that the E-Barbs have a much wider aggro radius so that they'll be pulled away more easily by your opponent if you send them in, and they're easier to kite. I think that that's an interesting concept. Another way that you could kind of tweak them a little bit is have them run one in front and one behind rather than side by side so that they're also a little bit easier to kite, because oftentimes you'll find yourself having kited the one that is closer to your mini tank that you're using to kite them away, and then the other one just kind of waltzes on over to your tower and absolutely destroys it. The last thing that I want to take a look at here is some of the tweaks that they made, some of the balance fixes that they made. Spells can now be played on the river. This is something that people have been asking for a long time. I'm glad that they finally did it. The log cannot be played on the river, and the Goblin Barrel cannot be played on the river, but all the other spells, Force the Barbarian Barrel excluded as well, can now be played on the river. So if you want to arrow the river, or if you want to fireball the river because you want to hit things that are on both sides of it at once, then you can now do so. They fixed a minor bug with the cannon cart. The witch, sometimes she would be spawning her skeletons and the skeletons would actually push her out of range of the current target, which would cause her to retarget, and they fixed that. I actually saw this next one on Reddit. I saw a replay of it. They fixed Sparky Occasionally, if she was knocked out of range of her target, she would fully reset her charge, which is absolutely terrible if you're playing Sparky. And lastly, they fixed out a bug with the Hunter. He can now hit targets that are directly on top of him. Sometimes he would target onto them and then shoot all his bullets and they would all miss him, causing him to do no damage. So if there was a baby dragon or some other air target on top of him, he would completely miss them. They fixed that bug. Now there's always going to be a whole bunch of things that you can include in these nerfs and buff lists, and a whole bunch of things that they potentially missed, but that's kind of my thoughts on all the cards that they did tweak, and I think they did an awesome job with what they did. I think that there's definitely a few things that they left out, but hey, they can only do so much at once, because if they do too many things all at the same time, then it's going to shift the meta too much. Alright, thanks so much for watching, guys. That's going to be it for tonight. Make sure that you subscribe if you like this, if you haven't already. Leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think they need to tweak and they haven't already. Shout out to Clarissa over here, my girlfriend. She's been playing Clash Royale on her phone this whole time in the background to help support the channel and help support our clan and all that good stuff. Alright, guys, have a good night.